Hi there, you are listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name's Matt Wakeling. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we're up to episode 9, and we are speaking to Bob Spencer, rock guitar royalty in Australia. I would say he was a member of Skyhooks and The Angels, and he's working on a new solo album, which sounds awesome. We've got a sneak preview of one of the tracks, bits of it anyway, and of course we speak in depth about the making of that album with Bob, and that's coming up in just a moment. Hey, this week I received some music off a guitarist from Toronto, Canada by the name of Mike Dedich. Now, Mike rips on the guitar. He's influenced by guys like Uli John Roth, Yngwie Malmsteen, that kind of school, and he's great. So I'm going to put some links on our Facebook page, on the Guitar Speak podcast page, to Mike's stuff. But it got me thinking, if there's listeners out there, more listeners like Mike, who are doing some interesting stuff on the guitar, and I really don't care what style or genre. If you've listened to this show for a little while, you know we're into everything from rock to ambient to whatever. So if you're doing something cool on the guitar, you want to send us some tracks, that'd be cool. If we get a few of them, we might dedicate part of a show to unearthing some new talent. So if you've got some tracks, send them to us. We're at guitarspeakpodcast@gmail.com. That's our email. Or you can find us on Facebook or on Instagram and contact us through there as well. Now, onto our interview with Bob Spencer. Now, Bob is a fantastic guitar player. I've been listening to Bob play for years. I first saw him live in the early 90s at a drum clinic, of all places. I think it was Matt Bissonette, who was David Lee Roth's drummer at the time. There was a clinic. He was drumming. Tracy Guns, the LA guitar player, was playing. He was meant to be the big draw card, and then Bob came and played. And man, fantastic. Great phrasing and tone and everything. Also saw Bob play with his band Black Cat Moan, which was around in the early 90s for a little while, kind of like a blues, electric blues kind of thing. And they were really great, and to hear him up close in a small pub was awesome. Now, of course, he's better known for his work in Skyhooks and also in The Angels. In The Angels, between 86 and 92, he was one of the chief songwriters, as well as being sharing guitar duties with Rick Brewster. That was an amazing partnership, and we listened to a little bit of playing from both gentlemen in the interview today. Now, I heard some really great news this year that Bob was working on a solo album, so he tells us all about that as well. In fact, we get a little bit of a sneak peek. He's actually released a video of the first track from the album. It's been completed yet. It's a tune called Who Are Those People? Here's a little bit of a listen now. Hey, and keep listening because we'll get to the solo during the interview. Bob Spencer, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Bob, when did you first start playing guitar?
Started when I was around 9, and my first lessons were at school. A really delightful brother at school. They were not all delightful, as you probably know, having heard about various ugly Morris Brothers things, but the guitar teacher that I had at school was a really good bloke. Who was smart enough to leave the brotherhood and get married. I began with him when I was around 9. The guitar was not my first instrument of choice. It was saxophone. And my dad, who's bigger than I am, he's kind of a big bloke, and I was a little bloke, he said that I was too small, and that was really it. He told me to choose something else. So for reasons that I can no longer remember, I chose guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And very quickly, I became pretty good. And within a few months of learning from Brother Edward at school, I knew what he knew. And I had to go outside and find a private guitar teacher. And I kept up my lessons until I was, I think, 16.
Okay, great.
So I learned for, I guess, what's that, 7 years. And being born in 1957 and learning when I did, it meant that I went through some of those exams that we used to have in the old days.
Okay.
And I found those certificates the other day, which is cute.
Very good.
So I learned for a long while that the lessons were short. Everything was half an hour in those days. And you didn't get to cover the things that I now believe are vitally important. We did things like scales and technique, and that's all great, but we did nothing with regards to playing guitar in a band,
mm-hmm.
or how to play a groove, or how to get an appropriate sound, or what equipment might work or might not. We did none of that. I mean, zero, not a damn thing. And now, of course, being the age that I am and having played as long as I have, I realise that those things are of vital importance. It's wonderful to know modes, but if you don't know how to put that into a solo, or you don't know how to pull a guitar sound, then it's pretty useless, really.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, your knowledge becomes useless if you can't put it into practice. My thing is, a lot of my point of view is based on the goal of having my students play in a band.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you know, the appropriate high heels and latex to wear is one aspect, but the other things are pulling a sound, what sort of pedals you might want to use, and accepting that there's no, and this opens up another doorway. There is no best. There's just stuff that you think works,
mm-hmm.
and maybe more importantly, fun. I'm only interested in equipment that allows me to have fun. I'm not really interested in whether it sounds good or bad or anything, really. If I'm having fun playing through something, I'll find a way to make it work.
Yeah, cool. If you weren't learning about being in a band, did you start doing garage bands or something around then? So when you're around 16 or so?
Yeah, it was earlier than that. I joined my first garage band when I was maybe 12 or 13,
yeah,
and,
cool.
and the blokes in the band were 18, 19 years old,
mm-hmm.
So it didn't last very long. They were talking about girls and cars and all sorts of things, and I had no idea what they were on about, so it didn't really last that long. On a playing level, I could keep up with them.
Yeah. What were you playing? What kind of tunes?
I recall doing things like Black Sabbath, stuff like that, and sort of writing our own material. It was very English based, as has most of my listening was English based rock, and rehearsing in the lounge room, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't last very long, and then I think I must have been around 14 when I joined a Sydney band by the name of Finch, and they were 18, 19, 20 years old.
Okay.
So emotionally I was, behind them, but again, playing-wise, I was on par with them. So the band kind of worked, and I stayed with them for what was it, 4 or 5 years?
Okay. And you ended up doing albums and tours with those guys?
Oh, yeah. We did my first album with them, which was a surfing album. A very famous surfer by the name of Peter Druin. If you're a surfer, you know that name.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else doesn't. We did an album for a film about him, and that was my first proper recording experience, which was great. I learned an enormous amount, and I asked a zillion questions, which is how I learn.
Yeah.
And then that had a couple of original tunes on it. Then later on we did another album, a studio album of maybe it was 9 or 10 original tunes.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a couple of singles, and we did a lot of touring, and I was still at school. I completed my 12 years at school. So in the last couple of years at school, I was out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sundays gigging.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and then on the road during my school holidays.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wow, and your parents obviously were on board.
Yeah, my parents were cool with all of that. They were cool. They weren't cool in a lot of other ways, but they were cool with regards to me going out and playing, and they trusted me. And I didn't develop a drug habit or anything like that, and I was too sensible for that. So they trusted me, and I was hanging out with people a lot older, but there didn't seem to be any problems.
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. I remember something funny where when I was about 16 or so, one of the parents at school chastised my parents for allowing me to be in a rock and roll band because they claimed that all musicians were drug addicts.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents stuck up for me. They were kind of like that. They would stick up for me as well.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah, it was kind of weird, but good. Yeah.
Awesome. What was your rig like then?
Oh, I had a late 50s Telecaster.
Wow.
With a homemade fuzz box. I wish I still had the fuzz box, of course, as we all do. And I played into a Leonard GB60 head with a Leonard 212 box.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it was great. I wouldn't mind having that rig back. If anyone has it, I would like it back. Thank you very much. I will pay for it. I would like it back.
Cool.
So that was my first real rig, and then I eventually went on to having 2 Wasp 100-watt heads and 2 Wasp quad boxes, as you did back then.
Great. It's a couple of good Aussie brands there, Leonard and Wasp.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and those sounds still inform me. And a lot of the bands that I saw were using Australian equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So I still remember the sound of Strauss, the ones that didn't explode, balls of fire. I remember the sounds of Strauss through JBLs. If you Strauss through JBL, I can hear that sound.
Wow.
I can still hear Wasps. They were the amps that were very common. Wasp, Leonard, things like Golden Tone, Moody.
Oh, yeah.
That sort of thing.
Okay.
So those sounds they became familiar to me, and an interesting thing is even to this day they still sort of sound familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I grew up on. I'm not from England. Even though I was listening to English amps, what was around me at gigs were mostly Australian amps and Fenders, things like Fender Twins. People didn't use little Fenders that I remember. If you had a Fender, it was a Fender Twin.
Right, yep.
And there were a few Marshalls around, of course, as well.
Yeah, cool. So when did you wind up with Finch?
When I joined the Skyhooks.
Okay, so it was a direct kind of shift over for you.
Yeah. Finch were going around in circles. We were a good band. Now, what I mean by that is that we played well and our singer sang very well. He's a very good singer. But we didn't have songs. We rather egotistically thought that we could get by being a good band. And I remember we were very concerned about how well we played. But we kind of missed the big picture, which is if you don't have songs, it really doesn't matter how well you play.
Sure.
So the band began going, excuse me, the band began going around in circles and doing the same gigs and not really increasing our audience and feeling a bit lost and having internal conflicts. And that was all brought to a head by us living in the same house in Melbourne.
Okay.
We moved to Melbourne. And I remember that there were 2 or 3 wives as well, and maybe 1 or 2 kids, and all in the same house. And that is just an absolute recipe for disaster. So I was very unhappy. That's the situation where you have your own cheese in the fridge and you don't want anybody else touching it.
Yeah,
that
sure.
sort of thing. It was terrible. And I had already become friends with Skyhooks because Finch supported them.
Oh, okay.
And I got along really well. I became a friend of Skyhooks. The other guys in the band didn't, but I did. And I kept in contact with Greg McCainch in particular. And one day, totally out of the blue, I used to see Greg socially. We'd see each other and write each other letters and postcards in those days.
Yep.
And keep in contact. And out of the blue, he called me and he left a message for me, and I called him back, and he said, "Can I see you when you get to Melbourne?" or something like that. I was, I don't know where we were, Ballarat or Morwell or something out in the Victorian country. And I said, sure. So I called him when I got back to Melbourne, and he said, well, Red's out. Would you like to join the band? And it was totally from left field, totally unexpected.
Wow.
And I thought, well, this is actually the opportunity I have to leave Finch regardless of what I do.
Sure.
Because Finch were going around in circles, and whether I join the Hooks or not, I really need to leave this other band. And it turns out that I did join Skyhooks,
Wow, brilliant.
And it was great. It was the biggest learning curve I've ever experienced in music.
Yeah. What kind of things would you learn?
Arrangements, attention to detail in terms of arrangements, how songs, watching Greg shape the songs.
Yeah, because he was
Greg
was the main songwriter in Skyhooks?
He's pretty much the only songwriter.
Okay.
Red wrote a couple of things, but
right.
But Greg wrote out of, I don't know how many albums the band had, 5 albums. He probably wrote all but 4 songs.
Wow.
So he was, and it's his band. It's always been his band, and I'm happy to say it's Greg's band. That's not a problem. It's not an issue. But I learned a lot just watching the way he put songs together and listening to the demos and then learning the parts, and the band were totally on top of the business end, which I'd never seen before.
Okay.
They were absolutely on top of it. Everybody worked for them. Mushroom Records worked for them. Michael Gudinski worked for them. The road crew, everybody. It was very clear who was at the top of the tree, and that was the band. And the band steered everything. And it was the most amazing experience to have, particularly as a young lad. I was 19 when I joined the band.
Okay, yep.
And they were also the most professional band I'd ever seen. The first time I saw Skyhooks, and I've told this story before, I'd heard them on the radio, and I thought the songs were really well done, really well done, very clever, very interesting, very clever. And I went with Finch to see them, and Skyhooks played their first gig under the pylons of the Harbour Bridge in Sydney. Must have been 74.
Okay, wow.
Ish. And we all went, and I was just hanging to hate them because I was convinced that they were fags from Melbourne, and in the nicest possible way back then. We're thinking 70s.
Sure,
okay?
sure.
It's not an anti-gay thing. And I was really kind of wanting to dislike them because they were fantastic, but they were from Melbourne, and I thought, well, this is not going to float. And they totally blew my mind. They were on another level. Now, I had seen bands like Sherbet. I'd seen Sherbet close up a number of times because Finch had supported them many times. So they were friends of mine, and I used to see them at nightclubs, and I'd seen the gigs. And so I'd seen Sherbet and Thorby and the La-Di-Dahs, and I'd seen all the what were the top bands. And Skyhooks made everybody sound like they were still at Mum and Dad's garage. When that gig that I saw in Sydney was frightening. It was really kind of scary. Wow. Oh, that's what you have to do if you really want to be good. That's what you have to do. Everything was together. Everything was together.
Yeah,
I've never seen anything like it. So I was converted, of course, but I didn't meet them until, I don't know, a year later.
Okay.
I don't really remember. Maybe a couple of years later, whatever it was.
Sure. And which albums were you involved with?
The first album, I only did 2 or 3. Did a live album called Live Be In It, which is a good live album, and a studio album which had women in uniform on it. That was called Guilty Until Proven Insane, which has got some good work, some work that I'm very, very happy with on that album. I was only 19 when I recorded it, but good guitar sounds, well recorded, well produced.
Put on a uniform, show him who's the boss.
Shirl left. Shirl was replaced by a lovely man by the name of Tony Williams, but basically the band fell apart. Okay. We did another album which I think is awful, which we all think is awful, sounds awful, terrible, and then we broke up. And then I supported myself. I played with various people. I played with John English and Russell Morris and John Swan and whatever.
Okay.
But I supported myself by being an audio engineer. I was a working recording engineer for a few years.
Oh, okay. So this is in Melbourne, so you stayed down there?
This is back in Sydney. I moved to Sydney.
Yep.
Yeah. And I've always loved recording. I'm quite addicted to recording.
Okay.
And ever since I was very young, I've wanted to know about everything that's going on, especially in the studio. So I got to do that full-time for a few years.
Great. And where were you working doing that stuff?
A couple of studios in Sydney.
Yeah.
Reel-to-reel studios.
Yeah.
That don't exist anymore.
Okay, sure.
But working with tape and big desks and all that. It was great. Awesome. It was a really good learning experience. And then I joined the Angels. Again, same sort of thing. There was no plan. Rick Brewster, in particular, had been a friend of mine for a very long while because I met the Angels before they were the Angels when they moved to Sydney in 72 or 3 or something.
Okay, because they were up from Adelaide, weren't they?
Adelaide.
Yeah.
So I met them back then, and we did gigs with them in Finch. And Rick was a mate, and we used to see each other. And I had another band going for a little while, and we did some Angel supports. It's all very friendly. And in those days, we used to do a little bit of hanging out together, and we'd see each other at gigs afterwards, nightclubs and whatever. So one day I was on the phone with Rick, and I called him about the studio that I was working in, and I called him to let him know that if he wanted to do some demos, then let me know and I could get him a good rate to do demos in a studio. And he said, "Oh, cool." And then I asked him, "What you doing? How's it going?" And he said, "Oh, John just left the band." And I said, "Oh, well, if you want a guitar player, let me know." So the next thing I was in the band.
Okay.
It was, it was just one of those things. You're on the phone and someone says blah, and you go, "Oh, blah," and he says, "Oh, blah blah blah." Oh, blah blah blah. And the next thing you're doing something.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it is. I don't mean to diminish it at all. It was cool, but it's just that's what happens when you have friends who are doing. I'm sure it happens with, carpenters and and alpha mechanics and all sorts of people.
Sure, yeah.
I'm sure that stuff happens in IT and whatever.
Yeah.
That's just what happened with us. I don't know how it happens now. There don't seem to be those after-hours clubs that bands go to like we used to. Plus, the music scene is quite small compared with what it was when I was a kid. And there were lots of bands, and we used to do socialising. And
Yeah.
so you'd find out what was going on.
Yeah, right. So when was this? This is around 84?
Oh, no, I think I joined the Angels in 80. Oh, God. Was it 85 or 86?
Okay. Yeah.
Angels fans know more about this stuff than I do.
Yeah, right.
I just don't think in those terms.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I remember the years, but I don't really focus on them.
Yeah.
So I think I joined in 85.
Okay.
85 sounds about right.
Okay. So both these bands, you replaced Red Simons in Skyhooks and then John Brewster. Both those guys are predominantly rhythm players. I mean, they do some parts, but predominantly rhythm guys. You come in with a whole different slant. Was there ever, I don't know, was there much adjustment in either of those bands? You come in as a lead player when there's an established kind of lead player there already?
Well, the Red used to play a lot of lead lines.
Okay.
An interesting thing about Skyhooks is that the rhythm lead thing is, if you forget about the solos, what's going on the rest of the time is quite mixed.
It was quite intricate, yeah.
It's very intricate, extremely intricate. So the hard work for me in Skyhooks was learning to play those parts in a really tidy, nimble fashion.
Yeah.
I've always been a nimble player, not a fast player, but I have reasonable accuracy. Learning to play those parts so that they were always absolutely repeatable and in sync with Greg. A lot of the guitar parts are doubled with the bass.
Okay, yeah.
So learning to play those guitar parts synced with Greg and Bob Starkey was a chore. It was hard. My phrasing was different from their phrasing. I hear triplets different to this day.
Okay.
I hear them slightly differently from how they hear triplets.
Yeah.
And there were little adjustments like that. And playing songs that Greg wrote, unlike what I was doing previously, playing songs that I wrote, because I wrote most of the music for Finch. Mm-hmm. So I wrote and played material, which is pretty easy, or I played Free, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, which is all pretty easy. And then you compare that with Skyhooks, where I had to learn parts that were written by Greg, which were nothing like Deep Purple or Black Sabbath or Grand Funk Railroad or any of that stuff. They were very, very particular parts. So that was the chore for me. And I don't mean chore in a bad way.
Sure.
That was my task.
That was the work of it, yeah.
Task is a better word. My task was to learn to play those parts as Greg wrote them.
So when you came into the Angels, was the original brief, we just filling John's parts to start with?
Yeah. It was easy. I was just playing rhythm parts. I don't play like John. John's older than I am, and he comes from a different background from me. John and Doc were 10 years older than I am. So John has more of a, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but he has a bit of the kind of 50s thing and also some of the 60s folk thing. Mm-hmm. He really likes Bob Dylan.
Yeah, sure.
So I didn't come from anything like that. I came from rhythm players who slashed their guitars. My background in rhythm playing is Paul Kossoff, Pete Townsend. Mm-hmm. It's, those two guys, I guess. So there was a difference. I don't think a bad difference, but it was a little bit different. And the guitar parts that John played were pretty much the same parts that Rick played.
Okay, yep.
A lot of the Angels is what a friend of mine calls the monolithic guitar sound.
That's like
Um,
perfect. That's such a great description.
it's really good. So I learned those guitar parts and played them to the best of my ability.
Yeah,
They don't sound like John, but John doesn't sound like me.
yeah, sure.
So I played the rhythm parts, and I didn't play any lead stuff at all. And then it just became pretty obvious that, well, Bob can play lead. It's another thing that we can sell. So I was obviously writing for the band.
Yeah, I was going to
Uh,
ask what was the process for writing? Because was it with Rick? Was he the other sort of main writer?
yeah, well, I've never stopped writing.
Yeah,
So I wrote most of the music for the band I was in earlier,
yeah.
Finch, and I'd never stopped. So I built up a whole stack of music while I was in Skyhooks.
Hmm.
Then I had a couple of original bands that went nowhere after Skyhooks, lots and lots of original songs. So I joined the Angels with I already had a back catalogue of lots of different bits and pieces,
Okay,
and
yep.
I just played them to Rick, and he'd go, "I like that," so that would turn into a song.
Yeah, cool.
I'd do a demo at home on my 4-track, or what later became an 8-track,
Hmm.
and I'd play them to the band, and if the band liked them, we'd record them, and it just so happened that pretty much everything that I think that everything I gave to the band recorded.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
so again, no grand plan. It's just what I do. I write all the time. In fact, the problem for me is that I write too much and it interferes with my life.
Okay,
I'm forever putting down ideas.
yeah,
So writing for the band came very naturally. And what I did was I was kind of selective about what I gave the band. I tried not to give the band stuff that those people couldn't really get their teeth stuck into.
yeah.
There was no point giving Doc a vocal part that was, for example, out of his range,
Hmm.
or whatever. So the material that I presented to the band was stuff that I thought the band would be able to deliver,
Yeah, cool.
and it turned out that it kind of worked. So first album I did with the band, there were a couple of my things on it, and then by the time of Beyond Salvation, a lot of that music is mine. I don't want to take credit for lyrics and melody.
Hmm.
Some melodies maybe, but not lyrics. But a lot of the music is mine.
Wow.
Yeah,
And that was the biggest album from the Angels.
it was. And obviously, I wrote with Rick, and Rick's no slouch when it comes to writing riffs.
Hmm.
So Rick provided a lot of stuff on that album,
Yeah, cool.
and most of the lyrics on that album are Rick.
Okay, yep, cool.
That doesn't mean he didn't write music. He did.
Yeah,
So it's hard to get this stuff across
yeah, sure.
clearly. But my involvement was music, and Rick's involvement was music and lyrics. And there were other lyrics written by Brent Eccles, and literally a few lines written by Doc, I think.
Okay, yep,
Doc really wasn't writing
okay,
at all. From the time I joined the band, Doc wasn't involved in the writing.
okay.
I don't know what happened. I've only heard stories, but I don't literally know what happened when Doc was writing before I was in the band, because I wasn't there.
Sure, yeah.
And so I can't inform. But while I was in the band, no, he wrote like almost nothing.
I always thought you and Rick were a good team.
Great team. I love Rick.
Yeah, he's one of the I don't know, just such a iconic melodic kind of soloist. And,
Yeah, look, I use his solos to teach my students.
Okay, yeah,
They tick so many boxes. And what's great about his solos is that they are the antithesis of guitar solos. They are compositions. So whereas most guitar players would think about what licks can I throw out,
Yeah.
Rick doesn't think like that at all. He thinks, what melody do I want, and then he happens to play it on guitar.
Yeah, cool.
Which is another task I give my students, by the way, to write solos in their heads, and then play them,
cool.
but not the other way around. It's just a task. It's a device. So Rick's fantastic at that.
Yeah, great. I'd add the point is for me though, Rick's so melodic, but so are you. Like,
in a different way.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking like solos like Are the Dogs?
Yeah.
The solo in that, super melodic. You could sing it. Your grandmother could sing it, and it's still rocking and aggressive, but it's quite tuneful.
I hope to have to do solos that people can sort of see.
Yeah.
So when and I did that. There's this that single thing I have called "Who Are These People?" If you've heard the solo in that.
I have.
Right. It's the same sort of thing. It's kind of kooky and wacky, but there's a story going on. You can kind of see it. So what I go for is. That's how I approach a solo. I want to be able to kind of see the image of the solo.
Okay. Yep.
And so Dogs Are Talking for me is that sort of solo. I'm sorry to sound like a bloody hippie, but I sort of see the structure of the solo.
Okay. Yep.
And I hope that people can remember how the solo sounds.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I aim for, because I don't think there's much point in playing a solo that everybody forgets. You think, well, why have a solo in the first place?
For sure.
Am I just showing off? You know. So Rick, anyway, back to Rick. Rick's fantastic at doing that, at writing melodic solos, and I loved that about working with him, and I still love that about hearing him. I played with them a few weeks ago in Sydney.
Okay.
I just did a few songs, and those solos, they're magic. Yeah, and the great thing about what he plays is you pretty much can't imagine those songs without those solos.
Yeah, definitely.
They would be severely lacking something. So I think. That's a wonderful thing. That's a really wonderful thing.
Yeah, cool. And I'd argue the same for yours, absolutely. The
thank you.
That track you mentioned,
Who Are These People?
Who Are These People? Yeah, what a great tune. I love that solo. It was like classic Spencer.
Thank you.
Super melodic and ripping. So that's from your solo album that you're putting together at the moment?
That's right. So I embarked on this scary crowdfunding journey.
Yeah.
And that went pretty well. Now I have to deliver the album, of course, so I'm spending the next 3 months at home recording it.
Yeah.
Who Are These People is, I guess that would be the lightest track of the 12.
Okay. Yeah.
A few of the other things are just big, slow monster grooves.
Cool.
Yeah, but at least another few of them. And there will be one instrumental song. There's a song called Maroubra, which is, I guess, a surf song.
Yeah, cool.
but the rest will be I'm singing on them as well.
Yeah, great. Well, you've always sung BVs and things.
Yeah, I've sung BVs, and now it's kind of path of least resistance, Matt. It's I could work with a singer, and let's face it, most of the planets sing better than I do. But it's really about when I can get together with somebody and work, and how much time we've got, and whether we can coordinate, and how it's going to go, and all that sort of stuff. And it's just easier. I'm not saying it's better, but it's just easier for me to continue doing it by myself.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah.
That's what I'll do.
I mean, who are those people? You deliver it perfectly. It's that whole sardonic kind of take on the net. And
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I wanted to be really kind of ordinary.
yeah.
So I didn't want to try and sound like a real singer, because I wanted the song to be delivered in a way that anyone could just, almost talk along with it.
Yeah, sure. Cool.
So, yeah, but it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, great. So that track is pretty much done, I guess.
Oh, that track's done. I'll tweak the mix probably for the album.
Yeah.
But I'm not re-recording anything. I'm over, and I don't want to listen to it again at all for a long, long while. So cool. That's done. And today I've been working on a song called "When the Devil Gets to Heaven," which is that sort of big groove.
Yeah, cool.
And that's got a drop D in it.
Oh yeah.
But it's not chugga chugga. It doesn't. And yeah, I'm just going to continue working here at home. I have a very small room and a small setup, but I use an amp made by Ivan Richards.
Oh yeah. Yep.
You know Ivan, who lives in Gosford?
Yeah, I know of his amps, definitely. Yeah.
Right. So I've got an Ivan Richards amp, a few pedals, and I've built myself an isolation box. Actually, you can see it. Can you see this big coloured thing? Right? See, it says Bob Star, my little girl.
That is great.
Okay.
I'll have to get a picture for the podcast, guys.
You see inside it?
That is awesome.
I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, that's great.
So a few mics in there and a 12-inch speaker box.
Yeah, cool.
Which I can pull out if I'm ever doing small gigs.
Yeah, nice.
And that's the sound that you hear on Who Are These People is just one Ivan Richards amp going into one speaker with, I don't think I used any pedals.
Okay.
I think the solo has an Ivan Richards blues drive on it.
Oh, okay, yep.
To make it middly, really middly.
Yeah.
I like solos to be really focused in the mid-range, really focused in the mid-range. But other than that, it's all pretty ordinary, guitar, amplifier. It's not rocket science.
Yeah. What's the red guitar you're using in the clip?
The red guitar is made by a lovely chap from the Victorian country by the name of Jeremy Johnson.
Cool.
And it looks, what attracted me to it in the first place was because it kind of looks like an old Guiatone.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And Jeremy and I tweaked the shape a little bit, but in terms of build, it's pretty normal stuff. It's a mahogany body, a mahogany neck, ebony fretboard, and pickups by the master pickup builder, Mick Briley.
Okay, cool.
And so I have Mick Briley's in 1, 2, 3, 4. Mick Briley's in 6 guitars.
Wow, there you go.
So I love his work.
They look really cool. They've got the foil kind of cover.
That one. Yeah, those. So they're like a filler shave razor. Yeah.
Nice.
It's a low output pickups.
Okay.
And those ones are a little bit bright, and low. I really like low output pickups. I'm not big on high output pickups. I figure if you want more dirt, just turn your amp up or use a fuzz box or something. So all the pickups I've got are reasonably low output.
Okay,
and
cool.
I've stopped taking notice of what magnets are in them.
Yeah.
I don't want to know anymore. I went through years of wanting to know everything,
Yeah.
and now I just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So I call Mick and I vaguely explain, if I can, what I'm after, and he makes something and they appear in the post, and only once have I said I don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
And he's made me new ones.
Yeah,
but every other time what has turned up goes into the guitars.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, I interrupted you. Sorry, you were talking about pulling guitar sounds before I asked you about your guitar.
I find it pretty easy.
Yeah.
And look, I don't know why I find it easy. That's something I haven't really thought about. But I find that getting a guitar sound is not all that hard. Maybe it's because when I'm recording, I'm not thinking about getting a great guitar sound. I'm thinking of getting a sound that I think will suit the song,
mm-hmm.
and that will suit the other instruments in the song, so everything will happily live together.
Yeah, right.
But I think it's pretty simple. You get an amp that you like, and if you're recording, there's no reason to have a loud amplifier. If you happen to like a loud amplifier, that's great, but there's no reason to have a loud amplifier purely because it's loud. So an amplifier that you think the tone is pretty good rather than the volume is really loud. That a rig that is responsive to your way of playing. Don't try and get a sound where you're trying to just mirror image or copy somebody else's sound, because you're not them, you don't play like them. And I think keeping those things in mind, it's not all that hard to get a guitar sound. I am careful. I don't want you to take that like I'm not careful. I am careful. Recording on slightly on the cleaner side of dirty helps.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's in the mix.
Yep.
If things are too dirty, you lose the front of the note, and the front of the note is the bit that I'm really concerned about. I'm not really concerned about sustain. I don't really care if guitars sustain or not. Well, if they don't sustain at all, they sound like a banjo. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A banjo is all front and no sustain.
Yeah. Right. Cool.
So.
Good way to look at it.
Yeah, so if you get to all front and no sustain, it sounds like a banjo. So that's probably not something you want to do. But the beginning of the note really concerns me, and a little bit of sustain. But I'm not one of those people who want a guitar to sustain forever. That interferes with my rhythm playing.
Okay. Yeah.
If a guitar sustains a lot, I can't play rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
It goes against my rhythm style. So I set up everything for a rhythm sound. I don't really set up for solo sounds. I set up for rhythm sounds, and hit a stomp box or turn your guitar up for the solo.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. So a lot of guys would do it the total opposite way. Set up for the solo and then.
Oh God, no!
Yeah.
I reckon. Well, why? At a gig, I don't know what percentage of the time you're playing rhythm, but I'm guessing 95% of the time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
90% of the time. So if I have to do a sound check quickly, like at a gig, let's say it's one of those things where you just drive to the gig and get up on stage and play, and with an unknown amp, all I do is hit a couple of A chords. If I can get an A chord to sound pretty good,
yeah,
and I carry with me one stomp box like a Richards Blues Drive,
mm-hmm.
then I'm done. If I can get my A chord to sound cool, then I just put the stomp box on the floor. I don't even need to check it. I know it's all going to work.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
I set up from a rhythm point of view, I don't set up anything from a solo point of view. I reckon that's the easy bit. I know guitar players stress about solo sounds, I just don't think that's the hard bit. My focus is always getting a rhythm sound.
Yeah,
And
cool.
for me, the solo sound follows. So that's just the way, it's just, as you know, you've interviewed a million guys. Everybody's got a different point of view.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Hey, I've got a couple of questions from the Facebook. I told a few people I was speaking to you, and a couple of people
Okay.
had some questions. Zog's guitar strings. Chris Churchwood, my mate, asked, "Are you still using
Yeah.
Zog's guitar strings?"
No, I'm not, but I'm still using the. Okay. No, the short answer is no, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
However, we need to go back in time to 1977, when it first dawned on me that the gauges that we were being sold were wrong.
Okay.
So since 1977, and I remember the gig, it was actually at the Canberra University.
Yeah.
With Skyhooks. I recall going, this is wrong, and I went out and bought different gauge strings. So from 1977, I've used my own custom gauge strings.
Okay. So what were they? What was the gauge you had a problem with?
I had a problem with everything I bought, whether it was 9 to 42 or 10 to 46 or 10 to 52. They all felt kind of wrong to me.
Okay.
Now I know that the reason they felt wrong is because the tensions are all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so from 1977, I started to put together my own string sets, normally with a 10 on top.
Yeah.
So they were around 10 to around 60. So
Wow.
I used that for a number of years, and then I eventually got to 12 to 66. Again, my own custom gauge based on how they feel.
Yeah.
And then years ago, I got so there is a story. I had a wrist problem.
Okay.
And I freaked out. So I went to light strings.
Yeah.
And then, so I started putting together my own light gauges. And they were around 9. This is very light.
Yeah.
Around 9, ending on around 50.
Okay.
And it just so happens that somewhere along the line I was introduced to Zog strings. I can't remember how. I was probably Googling. And so I bought some Zog strings. And the thing about them is the graduated tension. Now, the only reason I'm not using them anymore is because I like the sound of GHS strings.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm currently using a gauge I put together of GHS, which goes for any of the geeks. I'm assuming you have geeks.
Yeah.
My gauge is 9, 12, 16, 24, 32, 50.
Wow. That's a big jump on the end.
Well, it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, wow.
And
Cool.
that's the whole thing. So
course.
it allows me to still play the rhythm I play
Yep.
and play fiddly bits.
Yeah, cool.
So the only reason I went off the Zogs is because I felt they didn't sound quite as snappy as the GHS. The GHS, to my ears, sound a bit snappier. I'm just about to try the new D'Addario NY strings or something strings.
Yeah, right.
They're sending me my custom gauge.
Oh, cool.
So in singles.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and I advise everybody to mess around with gauges to find what feels right for you.
Yeah.
You know, just because, I don't know, Rory Gallagher used it or Jimi Hendrix or Slash, that's lovely. But if it doesn't feel right for you, then why are you doing it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's the same when it comes to equipment. There's no point in saying my favourite guitar player is, I don't know, mention somebody, therefore I'm going to use his rig.
Sure.
It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me anyway. So I'd suggest that players find what works for them.
Yeah.
It's like a car, you know. Car that you enjoy driving, I might not enjoy driving. So that's the long. I'm sorry, that's the long answer about the Zogs.
Yeah, right. Cool.
I love the tension.
Yeah.
But I'm now enjoying the GHS snappiness a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Hey, another question was, Do you prefer live tracking or overdubs, or I guess with your
I
home studio? Yeah.
I love it all.
Yeah.
I
Cool.
love it all. Yeah, I love the whole process, man. I love being with other people and tracking together. I love being by myself
Uh-huh.
and honing my parts. I don't like any one part of it anymore. That what I miss, I can say what I miss is I miss the friction in a band.
Uh-huh.
I think friction is a good thing, and working by myself means that I don't have anyone to argue with,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be a bit of a drag. Yeah, you think you have all this freedom, but in fact that can be a bit restricting.
Uh-huh.
I think friction is a good thing, so I miss having a little bit of friction with people I trust and like. By the
Yeah,
way, not
sure.
idiots.
Yeah.
I miss friction with idiots.
Yeah, yeah. So like a creative, a creative kind of friction.
Yeah,
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 cool. Awesome. So the album comes out in around October, is that right?
yeah. We're aiming for October. That's what I've promised people.
Yeah.
So that's what it will be. Now, the tunes are all written.
Yeah.
So now it's just a matter of putting down the drum tracks for a bunch of them
Yeah.
and staying at home and recording and then going through the grief of mixing
Mm-hmm.
and mastering and all that. So, yeah, I'm really happy to be doing it, and I just need to get it out of my system, Matt.
Uh-huh. Cool.
All these things out of my system.
Well, we're glad you're doing it because the bits we've heard so far are awesome. So that's cool.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah. What's the best way for people to keep up to date with the album and just what you're doing in general?
Well, Facebook is the way to do it at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a Facebook page which is /Bob Spencer Official. Right? Bob Spencer Official is the Facebook page.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not terribly good with Instagram and Twitter,
Sure.
just because I forget there are other things to do during the day.
Yeah, definitely.
So the other thing I will do is start blogging on my website, which is bobspencer.com.au. I'll start doing that soonish.
Okay,
Doing
cool.
some video blogs. So I intend to do some geeky stuff,
Yeah.
like, hey, this is what sort of microphone I like this week.
Yeah,
and
great.
I'll do some geeky stuff like that. Bearing in mind that this is just what works for me.
Yep.
And you might go, that is just the dumbest rig I've ever seen. And that's fine.
Cool.
So I'll do some geeky stuff, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Cool. Well, we'll look out for that definitely, and we'll keep plugging
Thanks, Matt.
along the process. That's great. So, Bob,
Thank
hey,
you.
mate, thank you so much for your time. It's been
My
fantastic,
pleasure.
mate. I've seen you play over the years in different places around Sydney anyway when you're up in town. So it's it's a great thrill and a pleasure to have met you and talked guitars with you. It's really cool.
Oh, I really appreciate your time, Matt. Thank you very much.
Cool. Cheers. All right, we'll talk soon and we'll look out for the next geeky update from you.
All right. Take care, mate. Thanks
Cheers,
a lot.
mate. See ya.
All right. Ciao.
All right, so that's the Bob Spencer interview, except we just kept chatting for a few more minutes after we kind of wrapped it up. So here's the encore. Here's 5 more minutes with Bob Spencer.
The thing that concerns me about guitar players is they get hung up on what gear everybody else is using.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I know that that's what keeps retail going.
Yes, very much.
But it's find what I now know is that finding your own voice is really the most important thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And whatever it takes to find your own voice, that's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what other people are doing. It's all interesting, and it's I'm a Paul Kossoff fan, as you know.
Yeah.
So if I see an article on Paul Kossoff's Les Paul, I'm going to read it, even though it's meaningless.
Yeah.
But it's Paul Kossoff.
Yeah, right.
So I'm going to read it, even though I know I'm wasting my time. I'm still,
Yeah,
Or,
of course.
Or it could be Jeff Beck's Fuzzbox. Now, it's meaningless to me, but it's Jeff Beck.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
But I think the danger is believing that stuff. You know, the danger is believing I have to do this or I have to do that. Or my favourite guitar at the moment is my Chinese SG Junior.
Okay. So the Tokai?
Yeah, the Chinese one.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And it's all the wrong woods, right? It's got a basswood body,
Okay.
some sort of maple neck,
Yeah.
some sort of rosewood. Lord knows where it came from.
In inverted commas for the listeners there.
Yeah, you know, just and the pickup is a Kinman P90.
Oh, okay, yep.
So that's the only kind of legitimate part of the guitar.
Yeah, right.
This is by far my favourite guitar at the moment.
Really? Wow.
I just love playing. I love playing Jeremy's guitar, but the whammy bar drives me nuts sometimes.
Oh, okay. Because in the tune, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, well, I love doing whammy bar stuff.
Yeah.
It's you can get that singing thing with a whammy.
Yeah.
I like that. I love the, you know, you can whoop, whoop, you can sing those things.
Yeah, cool.
I like that.
Is that a Jeff Beck thing for you? Was he
it's
the
kind
influence?
of Jeff Beck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't
Jeff
sound like Jeff Beck, but I'm just saying, you know, did you pick that kind
Beck
of?
was a huge influence on me.
Mm-hmm.
I've had Truth since I was the album Truth since I was, I don't know, 14, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, wow.
So yeah, Beck was an influence on me, and I love his recent use of whammy bar. I don't try and do that, but yeah, the guy's a master at doing it. Yeah, it's fantastic. So yeah, Beck is an influence, but I think I just think that more in terms of the, again, and I'm going to sound like a hippie, but it's kind of like the shape and the colour of the sound.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I'm after.
Yeah.
And a whammy bar is one way of helping me achieve those little colours.
Yeah, cool.
But I don't think, whammy bar, Jeff Beck. I think whammy bar, and then I think about the shape of the notes. I'm sorry to make it sound so odd.
No, I love that. I think one of the great things about guitar is that you can shape the note. You can literally shape the note so many different ways with your vibrato or your bar or you know, the fingering, the which string you play the exact same note on.
That's right.
So
all that stuff.
I love that kind of talk.
All those colours or timbre or timbre or whatever. All those colours that you can get. That's what I love about guitar. And the other thing I love about whammy bar is that you can float around the 12-tone system. Because I love the 12-tone system, well, kind of, when I'm playing rhythm. It's nice and steady-ish. But when I'm playing solos, I like to play notes that are bent slightly sharp or approach them flat and then don't go quite up to them.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of, if you look at that solo and Who Are These People, there's a lot of stuff there where it's not really, the notes are not really part of the 12-tone. And I don't do that because I can't pitch. I do that because I like that sound.
Yeah, cool.
I like the sound of a flat 7 that's flat.
Yeah.
Of a flat 7. And I like a flat third that's both flat and sharp of a flat third.
Okay.
And I like 5s that are slightly flat from 5. I like all that stuff.
Yeah,
those other colours, you know.
Cool.
So there's so much, isn't there, Matt? You can go on for years.
All right, well, that is the Bob Spencer interview wrapped up. My great thanks to Bob. It was such a great opportunity for me to speak to him, and I need to give a thank you, a shout out to Brett Kingman. Now, Brett, you'll know we interviewed back in episode number 5. Brett helped me get in touch with Bob and hooked us up. So thanks, Brett. I really appreciate it. You know what? Bob really, for me, encapsulates what a lot of our guests on the show so far have been about, and that's that, you know, he's been playing for a while, he's been playing professionally, you know, really for a long time, and is still hungry to create, still really passionate about playing the guitar and getting great sounds out of it and expressing himself with it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing his album when that gets out. And I encourage you guys, check Bob out on his Facebook page and look out for the album updates. They're sure to be really, really interesting. All right, so Guitar Speak Podcast episode 9 is just about done. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great hearing about people from all over the place listening to the show. Remember, you can find us on iTunes. You can subscribe on iTunes and have it delivered every week. You can also find us on Stitcher, which is great for Android users. And our website, guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn, Libsyn, guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com. You can find us there as well. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. You can email us, guitarspeakpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, if you've got some interesting tracks, you can send them to us. We'll see what we can do about all that. All right, until next week, we'll see you next time.